resource out of the ground, which is therefore then going to be passed on to the consumer. You know, we already have, you know, quite a few regulations that we're dealing with, and that would be, to me, that would be one of the primary negative factors and so on that would be in that. It's just increased regulation at a point in time when it's not necessary. It's already being regulated by the states.
That's right.
Okay, which I think is a very important fact. Yes.
I'm Porter Bennett, President and CEO of Bentech Energy. We're an information company that follows the natural gas fundamentals for the whole United States. One thing to add to what Mike said, it's not so much that it's more regulation, as it will be more regulation that will add to cost, but it's who's doing the regulating. It's the EPA would be the regulator under the national rules. EPA is not known for its quick decisions. That stretches things out farther, adds to the cost associated, in addition to the delays, add to the cost in addition to the actual cost of completing the regulatory process. And again, the point is all these are now managed at the state level, and the states presumably are much closer to the activity and would presumably know better than some federal agency in DC about what's good for the local area. So that's the editorial.
I'd like to close out, well, not to close out, but just to circle around on this and thinking of Rodney's question about what if hydraulic fracturing is prohibited, for example, a scenario that we don't see. That, again, would not affect the assessed natural gas resource base of the committee. It's the opening up of these shales, which are typically considered a source rock for gas. That is, they provide the gas, but they're not the reservoir. It's the opening up in these new plays, the Haynesville, the Marcellus, the Mancos, for example, that has shown us, that has improved our perception of the natural gas resource base. That perception would not change just because the technology was prohibited. What it would require, perhaps, if we were in that extreme situation, would be a footnote talking about what amount of that resource base is currently off limits. This would be identical to what the National Petroleum Council has done in the past. They've assessed resources and then they've shown an area that's off limits due to federal leasing requirements, for example. So again, technology has allowed us to see what is out there to improve our perception, but geologically that would not change with a reduction in technology.
Can I just follow that up? And because I was going to ask you, in fact, if in your report you do distinguish between reserves that can be in fact exploited and reserves, for instance, in the Gulf Coast in areas that are simply off limits.
No, we do not. We do not. Again, this is a geological look at the resource base, and there are other people in the past that have looked at gas resources and liquids and have looked at economics and access and so forth, but that's not part of the committee's charge. Yes, sir.
So we hear a lot of people saying that if you put a price on carbon and you have a carbon constrained world, it's going to drive people to gas and everybody's electricity rates are going up. All this information seems to belie that, right? I mean, if, for example, you force people away from coal to gas substantially because of a carbon constraint, that in fact prices shouldn't go up.
Yeah, I'm not really qualified to look at that from a policy standpoint. Chris or any other folks, do you have a feeling on that?
You raise a good point.
Those observations come from models. EIA and others have modeled an additional 3 TCF of gas required in the marketplace, given our supply position. In many cases, those supply positions were restricted. The supply view is stronger today than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and even 5 years ago. If those elements are modeled reflecting these resource requirements and the issues around resources, it should probably have some dampening impact on what we've seen in terms of price increases. Models are what they are. That's not necessarily reality. But when you look at it simply on paper, if we saw in the medium term an increase of 3 TCF annually required in the market to meet these demands, we'd be talking about 10 billion cubic feet per day. Okay? The country currently produces 55 to 60, depending on how you take that measure. It's a relatively small amount compared to the total. The potential to develop natural gas resources in this country, on paper, far exceed that kind of increase in near-term demand. The potential to support that market in the future with the numbers that we're seeing and the type of resource that we're seeing develop, that potential clearly seems to be there, but I'm using the word potential. I'm using the word on paper. I'm using the words model. The reality is, we'll see. We'll see what our policies are. How much of the resource are we able to develop in this country? What is our political and policy output that allows that to happen, where we have this domestic, secure source of energy that is there currently, and we understand it to be there. And again, I'm trying to get people over this notion that we're running out of the resource.
Well, along those same lines, I remember someone telling me once that, oh yeah, you got a lot of gas in some places, maybe the Appalachians or someplace, but try putting a pipeline through there where you gotta go through all these little towns and produce that, whatever.
Well, what's the
Don't
most
have
extreme
vast open
example of
spaces.
that?
So, this doesn't take into any of that into consideration, right?
No, John has referred to this as a geologic assessment, not an infrastructure assessment, clearly. Yes, sir, Nick?
But basically what Dr. Curtis has been saying is that the estimates for the potential of the Haynesville and Fayetteville and other shale formations could grow as drilling increases and they're explored further.
That is correct. We're not saying that we understand shales completely. As we go to more areas, as we develop new technology, and Mike Decker pointed out, the efficiency of the industry, the efficiency of the individual operators in accessing these resources improves. As we go into formations, there are many, many, many shale formations in this country that we have never tried to produce. And they are being looked at in the western United States, the southeast in the Black Warrior Basin, other shales in Appalachia. We are just really getting a first technical look at the producibility of shales over the last 2 years. So it's not just the Marcellus and the Haynesville, it's all these other formations that are potentially producible yet. Margaret?
Just follow that up and ask, is that true worldwide?
Yes, I got a good email. It is true worldwide from a gentleman in London. He said, is there something about the geology of Europe that precludes shale gas exploration and production compared to the United States? And the simple answer is no, but then there's another aspect of that. And we just had a meeting of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists in Denver, a worldwide meeting, and had some gentlemen from some shale consortia in Europe. One of the things they look at is you overlay the size of some of our shale plays, the Barnett, the Marcellus. That's a very large portion of the real estate in some of these countries, such as Austria. So you have to consider that the play may extend across international boundaries, which would be a policy and regulatory restraint, not a geological restraint. So there are some differences, but certainly in many areas in the Baltic, the Poles are pushing shale gas.